A chemical weapon is a munition that uses chemicals formulated to inflict death or harm on human beings. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons states, "The term chemical weapon may also be applied to any toxic chemical or its precursor that can cause death, injury, temporary incapacitation or sensory irritation through its chemical action." Munitions or other delivery devices designed to deliver chemical weapons, whether filled or unfilled, are also considered weapons themselves. They are classified as weapons of mass destruction, though they are distinct from nuclear weapons, biological weapons, and radiological weapons. All may be used in warfare, known by the military acronym NBC, for nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. Weapons of mass destruction are distinct from conventional weapons, which are primarily effective due to their explosive, kinetic, or incendiary potential. Chemical weapons can be widely dispersed in gas, liquid and solid forms, and may easily afflict others than the intended targets. Nerve gas, tear gas and pepper spray are three modern examples. Lethal, unitary, chemical agents and munitions are extremely volatile, and they constitute a class of hazardous chemical weapons that are now being stockpiled by many nations. All are liquids at normal room temperature, but become gaseous when released. Widely used during the First World War, the effects of so-called mustard gas, phosgene gas and others caused lung searing, blindness, death and maiming. Pepper spray is of common use today. It is potentially lethal. There are no recent records of pepper spray being used in war, despite the fact that it inflicts fewer injuries and side effects compared with impact and explosive weapons. Under the Chemical Weapons Convention, there is a legally binding, worldwide ban on the production, stockpiling, and use of chemical weapons and their precursors. Notwithstanding, large stockpiles thereof continue to exist, usually justified as only a precaution against putative use by an aggressor. International law on chemical weapons. Before the Second World War, international law has prohibited the use of chemical weapons since 1899, under the Hague Convention. Article 23 of the regulations respecting the laws and customs of war on land adopted by the First Hague Conference, especially prohibited employing poison and poisoned arms. Also, a separate declaration stated that in any war between signatory powers, the parties would abstain from using projectiles, the object of which is the diffusion of asphyxiating or deleterious gases. The Washington Naval Treaty, signed February 6, 1922, also known as the Five-Power Treaty, aimed at banning CW, but did not succeed because France rejected it. The subsequent failure to include CW has contributed to the resultant increase in stockpiles. The Geneva Protocol, officially known as the Protocol for the Prohibition of the Use in War of Asphyxiating, Poisonous or Other Gases, and of Bacteriological Methods of Warfare, is an international treaty prohibiting the use of chemical and biological weapons. It was signed at Geneva June 17, 1925, and entered into force on February 8, 1928. 133 nations are listed as state parties to the treaty. Ukraine acceded August 7, 2003, and is the most recent member nation. This treaty states that chemical and biological weapons are justly condemned by the general opinion of the civilized world, while the treaty prohibits the use of chemical and biological weapons. It does not address the production, storage, or transfer of these weapons. Later treaties did address those omissions and have been enacted. Modern agreements. The 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention is the most recent arms control agreement with the force of international law. Its full name is the Convention on the Prohibition of the Development, Production, Stockpiling and Use of Chemical Weapons and on the Destruction. That agreement outlaws the production, stockpiling and use of chemical weapons. It is administered by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which is an independent organization based in The Hague. The OPCW administers the terms of the CWC to 192 signatories, which represents 98% of the global population. As of October 2015, 65,720 of 72,531 metric tons of the stockpiles have been verifiably destroyed. The OPCW has conducted 4,167 inspections at 195 chemical weapon-related and 1,103 industrial sites. These inspections have affected the sovereign territory of 81 states parties since April 1997. Worldwide, 4,913 industrial facilities are subject to inspection provisions. Use. Chemical warfare involves using the toxic properties of chemical substances as weapons. This type of warfare is distinct from nuclear warfare and biological warfare, which together make up NBC, the military initialism for nuclear, biological, and chemical. None of these falls under the term conventional weapons, which are primarily effective owing to their destructive potential. Chemical warfare does not depend upon explosive force to achieve an objective. Rather, it depends upon the unique properties of the chemical agent weaponized. A lethal agent is designed to injure or incapacitate the enemy, or deny unhindered use of a particular area of terrain. Defoliants are used to quickly kill vegetation and deny its use for cover and concealment. An agent can also be used against agriculture and livestock to promote hunger and starvation. Chemical payloads can be delivered by remote-controlled container release, aircraft, or rocket. Protection against chemical weapons includes proper equipment, training, and decontamination measures. Countries with stockpiles. CWC states with declared stockpiles of 190 signatory nations to the CWC. State parties listed below have also declared stockpiles, agreed to monitored disposal and verification, and in some cases, used CW in conflict. Both military targets and civilian populations have been affected. The affected populations were not always damaged collaterally, but rather at times the target of the attack. As of 2015, only 3 nations are confirmed as having chemical weapons: the United States, Russia, and North Korea. India declared its stock of chemical weapons in June 1997. India's declaration came after the entry into force of the CWC that created the OPCW. India declared a stockpile of 1044 tons of sulfur mustard in its possession. On January 14, 1993, India became an original signatory to the CWC. By 2005, from among the 6 nations that had declared possession of chemical weapons, India was the only one to meet its deadline for chemical weapons destruction and for inspection of its facilities by the OPCW. By the end of 2006, India had destroyed more than 75% of its chemical weapons material stockpile and was granted extension for destroying and was expected to achieve 100% destruction within that time frame. On May 14, 2009, India informed the United Nations that it has destroyed its stockpile of chemical weapons. Iraq. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which oversees destruction measures, has announced the government of Iraq has deposited its instrument of accession to the Chemical Weapons Convention with the Secretary-General of the United Nations, and within 30 days, on the 12th of February 2009, will become the 186th state party to the convention. Iraq has also declared stockpiles of CW, and because of their recent accession is the only state party exempted from the destruction timeline. On September 7, 2011, Mr. Hoshyar Zebari entered the OPCW headquarters, becoming the first Iraqi foreign minister to officially visit since the country joined the CWC. On June 28, 1987, Iraqi aircraft delivered what was believed to be mustard gas in an attack against the Kurdish city Halabja and Sardasht. On two separate attacks against four residential areas, victims were estimated as 10 civilians dead and 650 civilians injured. Japan stored chemical weapons on the territory of mainland China between 1937 and 1945. The weapons mostly contained a mustard gas Lewisite mixture. The weapons are classified as abandoned chemical weapons under the CWC, and Japan has started their destruction in September 2010 in Nanjing using mobile destruction facilities. Libya used chemical weapons under Muammar Gaddafi's regime in a war with Chad. In 2003, Gaddafi agreed to accede to the convention in exchange for rapprochement with Western nations. At the time of the Libyan uprising against Gaddafi, Libya still controlled approximately 11.25 tons of poisonous mustard gas. Because of destabilization, concerns have increased regarding possibilities and likelihood that control of these agents could be lost. With terrorism as a core concern, international bodies are seeking to ensure Libya is held to its obligations under the treaty. Libya's post-Gaddafi National Transitional Council is cooperating with the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons regarding the destruction of all legacy chemical weapons in the country. After assessing the chemical stockpiles, the Libyan government will receive a deadline from the OPCW to destroy the weapons. Russia entered the CWC with the largest declared stockpile of chemical weapons. By 2010, the country had destroyed 18,241 tons at destruction facilities located in Gorny and Kambaka, where operations have finished, and Shushi, Maradaikovsky, Leonido-Uka, while installations are under construction in Poshep and Kisna. United States. The U.S. stored its chemical weapons at 8 U.S. Army installations within the continental United States. The stockpiles were maintained in exclusion zones at the following Department of Army installations: Tula Army Depot, Utah; Pine Bluff Arsenal, Arkansas; Umatilla Depot Activity, Oregon; Pueblo Depot Activity, Colorado; Anniston Army Depot, Alabama; Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland; Newport Army Ammunition Plant, Indiana; Bluegrass Army Depot, Kentucky. The remaining 6.6% was located on Johnston Atoll in the Pacific Ocean. Currently, stockpiles have been eliminated at Johnston Atoll. APG, NAAP, UMDA, PBA, TEAD, and ANAD. PUDA will begin elimination during FY 2015, and complete in FY 2017. BGAD will be last to complete this elimination, which tentative dates have not been set. The U.S. policy on the use of chemical weapons is to reserve the right to retaliate. First use, or preemptive use, is a violation of stated policy. Only the President of the United States can authorize the first retaliatory use. Official policy now reflects the likelihood of chemical weapons being used as a terrorist weapon. Syria. Prior to September 2013, Syria was one of only 7 states which are not party to the Chemical Weapons Convention. However, it is party to the 1925 Geneva Protocol prohibiting the use of chemical weapons in war, but has nothing to say about production, storage or transfer. Syrian officials have stated that they feel it appropriate to have some deterrent against Israel's similarly non-admitted nuclear weapons program, when questioned about the topic. But only on July 23, 2012, the Syrian government acknowledged for the first time that it had chemical weapons. Independent assessments indicate that Syrian production could be up to a combined total of a few hundred tons of chemical agent per year. Syria reportedly manufactures sarin, tabun, VX, and mustard gas types of chemical weapons. Syrian chemical weapons production facilities have been identified by Western non-proliferation experts at approximately 5 sites, plus one suspected weapons base: Al-Safir, Syrian, Hama, Homs, Latakia, Palmyra. In July 2007, a Syrian arms depot exploded, killing at least 15 Syrians. Jane's Defense Weekly, a UK magazine reporting on military and corporate affairs, believed that the explosion happened when Iranian and Syrian military personnel attempted to fit a Scud missile with a mustard gas warhead. Syria stated that the blast was accidental and not chemical-related. On July 13, 2012, the Syrian government moved its stockpile to an undisclosed location. In September 2012, information emerged that the Syrian military had begun chemical weapons tests and was reinforcing and resupplying a base housing these weapons, located east of Aleppo in August. On March 19, 2013, news emerged from Syria indicating the first use of chemical weapons since the beginning of the Syrian uprising. On August 21, 2013, testimony and photographic evidence emerged from Syria indicating a large-scale chemical weapons attack on Ghouta, a populated urban center. An agreement was reached September 14, 2013, called the Framework for Elimination of Syrian Chemical Weapons, leading to the elimination of Syria's chemical weapons stockpiles by mid-2014. On October 14, 2013, Syria officially acceded to the Chemical Weapons Convention. Non-CWC states with stockpiles Israel. Although Israel has signed the CWC, it has not ratified the treaty and therefore is not officially bound by its tenets. The country is believed to have a significant stockpile of chemical weapons, likely the most abundant in the Middle East, according to the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. In a 1983 CIA report, it was stated that Israel, after finding itself surrounded by frontline Arab states with budding CW capabilities, became increasingly conscious of its vulnerability to chemical attack, undertook a program of chemical warfare preparations in both offensive and protective areas. In late 1982, a probable CW nerve agent production facility and a storage facility were identified at the Diamond, a sensitive storage area in the Negev desert. Other CW agent production is believed to exist within a well-developed Israeli chemical industry. In 1992, El Al Flight 1862 crashed on its way to Tel Aviv and was found to be carrying 190 liters of dimethyl methylphosphonate, a CWC Schedule II chemical used in the synthesis of sarin nerve gas. Israel insisted at the time that the materials were non-toxic. This shipment was coming from a U.S. chemical plant to the IIBR under a U.S. Department of Commerce license. In 1993, the U.S. Congress Office of Technology Assessment (WMD Proliferation Assessment) recorded Israel as a country generally reported as having undeclared offensive chemical warfare capabilities. However, it is unclear whether Israel still keeps its alleged stockpile of chemical weapons. North Korea is not a signatory of CWC and has never officially acknowledged the existence of its offensive CW program. Nevertheless, the country is believed to possess a substantial arsenal of chemical weapons. It reportedly acquired the technology necessary to produce tabun and mustard gas as early as the 1950s. In 2009, the International Crisis Group reported that the consensus expert view was that North Korea had a stockpile of about 2,500 to 5,000 tons of chemical weapons, including mustard gas, sarin and other nerve agents. Manner and form. There are three basic configurations in which these agents are stored. The first are self-contained munitions like projectiles, cartridges, mines, and rockets. These can contain propellant and/or explosive components. The next form are aircraft-delivered munitions. This form never has an explosive component. Together they comprise the two forms which have been weaponized and are ready for their intended use. The U.S. stockpile consisted of 39% of these weapon-ready munitions. The final of the three forms are raw agent housed in 1-ton containers. The remaining 61% of the stockpile was in this form, whereas these chemicals exist in liquid form at normal room temperature. The sulfur mustads H and HD freeze in temperatures below 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Mixing leucite with distilled mustard lowers the freezing point to -13 degrees Fahrenheit. Higher temperatures are a bigger concern because the possibility of an explosion increases as the temperatures rise. A fire at one of these facilities would endanger the surrounding community as well as the personnel at the installations, perhaps more so for the community having much less access to protective equipment and specialized training. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory conducted a study to assess capabilities and costs for protecting civilian populations during related emergencies, and the effectiveness of expedient, in-place shelters. Disposal. The stockpiles, which have been maintained for more than 50 years, are now considered obsolete. Public Law 99-145 contains Section 1412 which directs the Department of Defense to dispose of the stockpiles. This directive fell upon the Dodworth joint cooperation from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The congressional directive has resulted in the present chemical stockpile disposal program. Some places where chemical weapons were tested, such as the San Jose project in Panama, were not included in the disposal program. Thousands of mines on the island are still full of chemical gas and can be set off by passers-by. Historically, chemical munitions have been disposed of by land burial, open burning, and ocean dumping. However, in 1969, the National Research Council recommended that ocean dumping be discontinued. The Army then began a study of disposal technologies, including the assessment of incineration as well as chemical neutralization methods. In 1982, that study culminated in the selection of incineration technology, which is now incorporated into what is known as the baseline system. Construction of the Johnston Atoll Chemical Agent Disposal System began in 1985. This was to be a full-scale prototype facility using the baseline system. The prototype was a success, but there were still many concerns about CONUS operations. To address growing public concern over incineration, Congress, in 1992, directed the Army to evaluate alternative disposal approaches that might be significantly safer, more cost-effective, and which could be completed within the established time frame. The Army was directed to report to Congress on potential alternative technologies by the end of 1993, and to include in that report any recommendations that the National Academy of Sciences makes. In June 2007, the disposal program achieved a milestone, reaching 45% destruction of the chemical weapons stockpile. The Chemical Materials Agency releases regular updates to the public regarding the status of the disposal program. By October 2010, the program had reached 80% destruction status.